Rhetorical analysis. Be sure to pause and rewind the video at any time to take notes and reflect. When you're asked to analyze the rhetoric of a text, you're basically trying to answer two questions. What is an author trying to achieve? And how are they trying to achieve it? This, at its heart, is what rhetorical analysis is all about. Looking at a persuasive text and trying to explain what an author is trying to do and how they go about doing it. Rhetorical analysis is the process of analyzing the rhetoric of a given text. And you do this by examining the rhetorical situation of the text, deciphering the author's exigence and purpose, interpreting the rhetorical constraints the author was working within, and identifying and explaining the rhetorical strategies the speaker uses in response to those constraints to achieve the purpose. A rhetorical strategy is just a rhetorical means to a rhetorical end. It's the use of a rhetorical appeal to achieve a particular effect in response to some element of the rhetorical constraints as part of some larger strategy. Here's an example of a rhetorical strategy. First of all, an appeal. Fred Rogers appeals to Logos by arguing that his program is inexpensive compared with typical animated children's programming. The effect he's trying to achieve is that he wants his request to appear reasonable. And of course, he's dealing with the constraint that his audience are concerned with saving as much money as possible. All of those elements together, what the speaker is doing, what the speaker hopes to achieve, and why the speaker is doing it, all of that information together is a rhetorical strategy. Here's another example. The appeal, when Martin Luther King Jr. appeals to pathos by envisioning a future where all people can live together in harmony, the effect he's going for is that he wants to stir feelings of hope that the civil rights movement can ultimately succeed. And he's doing this because many in his audience may feel a certain hopelessness since this issue has been around for so long without resolution. When you write about a rhetorical strategy in a rhetorical analysis, say a rhetorical analysis essay, you basically need to explain 5 things. The what, the how, the where, to what end, and finally the why. What is the author doing? How is the author doing it? Where in the text is this? What effect does the author hope to have with this? And finally, why do this in the first place? You have a lot of freedom in the way that you answer these questions, but there are 2 basic methods of organizing this kind of analytical argument. Method 1 is the same order I just showed you. You start with the what, then you include the how and the where, then the to what end, and finally the why. So you start off by describing the specific appeal that the speaker is making. Then you provide text evidence by explaining how they go about making that appeal, where it appears in the text. You explain the effect by giving us to what end are they using this particular appeal. And then finally the why, explain the constraints that the speaker was facing that dictated they use this particular appeal. Method 2 is just kind of inverted. You could start with the why, start with the constraints, talk about what the speaker was facing, and then respond with the what. This creates kind of a cause and effect of organization where you talk about what the speaker was facing, then how they responded to that. And then of course get into the text evidence of the how and the where, and then finally explaining the effect at the end. Here's an example of that first method that starts with the appeal. In his testimony before the United States Senate, Fred Rogers builds ethos by establishing his expertise in child psychology. In paragraph 4, Rogers reveals that he has studied child development for 6 years, and later he explains that, in addition to producing his television show, he works with children in small group settings to help them with emotional problems. And that's from paragraph 16. His apparent experience in these fields helps him appear more credible in the eyes of his audience, since he is speaking in favor of television programming which deals with children's emotional development. This technique is effective because Rogers is best known for his show. Demonstrating this expertise helps him correct any misperceptions his audience might have that he is merely a television personality. There, I've started with the appeal, the what. I've gotten into the how and the where with my text evidence. I explained the effect, to what end he's using that appeal. And then finally the why, the rhetorical constraints that explain why he's using that appeal in the first place. Now, if I flip that around, I could start it with the why, with the rhetorical constraints, and it would sound something like this. Because Fred Rogers is a children's television personality, his audience may believe he lacks expertise to discuss issues of child development. Rogers overcomes this through building ethos by establishing his expertise in child psychology. In paragraph 4, Rogers reveals that he has studied child development, and so on. Use these sample paragraphs as models for your final assessment. The assessment will ask you to study a selection of persuasive texts and respond to a series of short answer questions about rhetorical strategy. That's it for this final video. Please go ahead and move on to complete your final assessment for this unit.